Alright, so I'm going to use that special tool now. I'm going to go ahead and I've got my long brake bar on it. I'll find a spot where I can pull it inside the pulley, and I'm going to actually prop it up against the frame rail over here on the passenger side. Now I'm going to get my 18 millimeter socket and about a 2-inch extension and a ratchet, and I'm going to start rotating it until I finally get it to where the pulley stops spinning and the tool is kind of locked down up against the frame, and we'll start backing up on the bolt. It could be pretty snug. This one is. There we go. Now we got the bolt loose. I'll be fine. Now, one thing you need to take special care of is make sure you don't damage the radiator if any tools here. If you need to put a piece of cardboard up here, that works great. That's what I highly recommend, because especially when you're using a puller or taking this off, you don't want to poke a hole in the radiator and cause you a leak. Then you got a new repair you got to do. So now I can go ahead and take the tool off. Let's sit aside. Now I can just work on backing that 18 millimeter bolt out. So now this thing is pressed on. Not like a hydraulic press, but it is pressed on as far as a very extremely tight fit, so you're not going to just pull it off. It's not one of those keyed weight crankshaft pulleys that goes on. This goes on any way, not just more than one way. So excuse me, it goes on more than one way, not specifically just one way. So we'll actually be using a setup here to try to pull that off. Sometimes I have to rig up different things, but it will be a 3-jaw puller that we try to use, and I'll go ahead and move on to that. Alright, so at this point we've got our 3-jaw puller on. Now it's a style that a lot of Chryslers use. This one actually has a long pin that we inserted through the front of the crankshaft that bottoms out where the threads were, so it's not physically pushing on the face of the crankshaft. In a lot of cases these days, a lot of the pulleys actually cover up the front of the crankshaft, so all you got is the hole that leads to the bottom of the shaft where the threads were. That's not how it is in this case, but either way, that's how we pull them off. You can go to your local parts house or actually purchase one online. When you pull up Chrysler balancer puller, you usually see a picture of a possible 3-jaw with like they have different inserts. It might be 3-inch, 4-inch, or 5-inch pins. Now this one I'm going to be holding the tool with one wrench and use another wrench to tighten down to pull the puller off. Now you're probably saying, why not use a socket and ratchet? Well, I got the radiator probably 1.5 inches, 2 inches away from the end, so I've got a clearance issue there. And plus, I don't really like bashing my knuckles up against the radiator. It seems to cut the flesh very well. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and just do it this way. I'll use a wrench, I'll take my time, and I'll be careful not to damage the radiator. But if you don't do this often, I'd highly recommend putting a piece of cardboard in front of it. If you got a piece of cardboard, just cut something out, push it up in there, and work it off. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with pulling this, or tightening up on this puller and getting the balancer off. In the meantime, I'm not going to bore you with 10 minutes of me doing this. So hang tight while I get the balancer off, and then we'll work together on that cover. So we got our wonderful balancer out of the way. So now we can get to the new and improved one-piece cover at the bottom. We've got the darker T30 I mentioned earlier. You got a silver on the aluminum, you got a black painted one right there, and then we got a total of 3 10 millimeters going around at the 3, 6, and 9 position on the crankshaft right around, and then we got a stud that sticks out with a 15 millimeter nut. I'm gonna go ahead and take all 5 of those things loose, get this out of the way, and then we'll start working on, I'm gonna do a basic alignment of the belt where it is now as far as the original belt, get it close. That way when we go back with it, we don't spend so much time. And so I've got the bolt back in it. The 18 millimeter we took loose that went through the front of the balancer. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and spin the engine over by hand to where I get all the timing marks start lining up. We got a cut right here in the timing cover. Now we'll get a little more in detail about this, but I'm just doing a preliminary, making sure the belt and everything's where it needs to be pulley, so when I go back for another one, I'm not having to do a lot of adjustment. There's a cut in the timing cover, a little notch, and then there's going to be a little notch on the gear as well. Now I painted this one white so you can see it, so it's not going to be white on the car. Now the other came is the same exact way, notch in the cover, notch on the gear. Now down on the crank, you've actually got a point. Like I said, we'll get more detail of that shortly. You got a little point on the gear that points up to another point pointing down at it on the oil pump assembly. So once you get all those kind of lined up, you'll know once you get your cams up here. If these marks get close, that's good enough. Go ahead and just line them up out here, and then you can go ahead and start worrying about getting that tensioner off. Now, the tensioner is held on by two 13mm bolts going along the bottom. You can either use an air ratchet, or I like to use a ratchet wrench myself, and just start backing them off, and then you're going to take it off. Now, on this job, like I said, we're going to be replacing that. It's a mileage thing. If I'm in here doing this much work, I'm replacing that tensioner, and I'm replacing this idler pulley slash tensioner pulley. It's just a matter of backing it all the way out. Now the new one will come with a pin in here because it's a hydraulic tensioner, but it's not hydraulically fed as far as oil pressure from the engine. This is a self-contained unit, and once it's compressed, there's some holes on the side that line up that a pin goes into, basically almost like a hand grenade if you ask me. And once you get everything set the way you want, you'll pull the pin out, and then the cylinder in the center will come up, make contact with this pulley, and then kind of give you a preset the timing belt, give it the proper tension. So like I said, I'll go ahead and take the rest of these bolts out. We'll take just a few seconds, and then once I get that off, then it's a matter of getting enough slack to actually go ahead and pulling the belt off. Then we'll just be down to that pulley, taking it off, as well as the water pump itself. Alright, so there we go. We slide it out to the bottom. So there you go. That's your tensioner right there. And you see the holes right here. Here's one, and here's one in the shaft. If you were reusing this because you're doing a repair, you would put this in a hydraulic press, and you would squeeze down to those line up, and then you put your pin or Allen wrench all the way through. Usually something pretty strong because it has a lot of pressure. You can't use something like a cotter pin or nothing like that because it actually will bend it. So this is what you need. Now, we can go ahead and take the belt off. Just basically come right off. Now, the next step will be, we're going to replace that idler pulley. That's got 15mm on it. We'll go ahead and take that off in the meantime, and then we'll jump on getting ready to do the water pump. And what I'll probably do on the water pump, being that there's a clearance getting down in here to see everything, I'm going to show you the water pump off the car, the brand new one, and show you where the bolts are, so that way you get a good visual of how it's supposed to be.